25 minutes after 8, good to have you with us on the Youth Day edition of the South African Morning. I'm Gareth Edwards. Tumela Motatwane is not with me today. She's looking after South Africa tonight, a little bit later in the day. So we all know how the world has changed. Technology has brought us all closer together. But what does that mean when it comes to youth? Are there jobs that the youth can go into that perhaps weren't around a few years ago? I'll use the word influencers. And some of you might cringe when you hear that. But is it really as bad as we think? What is the other side of this story? It's the reality of the modern world. It's what we do. So can you actually cash in on social media and make money out of it, get a job out of it even? Communication strategist Lerato Chinkeng joining us this morning. Hello to you, Lerato. It's clearly freezing in Johannesburg. Tell me you're cold without telling me you're cold. Take a look at Lerato on air. Good to have you with us, Lerato. Influencers live large, graduates starve. How fair is that? Good morning.
Good morning, Gareth. Indeed, Johannesburg is freezing this morning. There is some merit to that statement, right? Because the difference between the two really, or at least to an extent, is that people would acquire a degree or a qualification with the hope of being able to use the knowledge that they gained from that qualification into a job. Whereas to an extent, content creation in particular, we have seen it that it has allowed for people to, one, be self-starters, two, promote the kind of content that is then attractive to those who, want to collaborate with others, and they are then able to leverage or at least, borrow from one, either their credibility or their following. For the longest time, following was the one metric that was being used, particularly by brands, that if you had a huge following, the likelihood of collaborating with brand X or Y or Z was a lot more. But, with the evolution of social media, we are now seeing a concept that is called nano-influencing, right? Where nano and micro-influencing, where you don't have to have such a huge following, but you need to be some sort of, an authority, or you niche yourself with a specific kind of subject, and they find that somebody with a huge following may not be as well connected with the subject, and therefore you have some sort of dissonance between the influencer and the brand and the followers. And the micro influencing then gets them to connect and engage, and that's what brands are really looking for.
Influencers a couple of years ago got a bit of a bad rap, didn't they, Lerato? Because there was a very thin grey area between being an influencer, as you say, someone who's an expert on a certain topic. I follow quite a few gaming experts on social media. But where is the line drawn between being an influencer and being someone who's being paid to say a certain thing for a brand? That's why influencers got a bit of a bad rap a few years ago, because we started to see through that, didn't we?
No, absolutely. In fact, if you remember, I think it was last year where South African breweries had they got a bad rap when they used, one of the popular influencers like Kanye Mbau, when they were trying to communicate their messages around the jobs that were lost in the industry as a result of the lockdown regulations that were not allowing for them to sell as much quantities as they were. And the biggest issue there really, Gareth, was the disconnect between somebody like a Kanye who, and again, the trick with brands now has been, listen, we don't want to write a script for you. We want to use your authenticity to connect with your audience. Your audience connect with your authenticity, not necessarily with us as a brand. But they got it wrong, because then there was a mixed messaging in there. So sometimes it's really you realizing that brands are trying to strike a fine balance between giving you a script to read so that you don't sound VS, right? But also saying, what are the things that, because you are not here with this brand every day, what are the mistakes that you are likely to commit? And we've seen a number of brands committing such mistakes.
Yeah, it can go wrong horribly quickly, can't it, Lerato? I want to ask a question about this before we go. It is Youth Day, of course. Is social media a job? I'm not talking about being a social media editor or someone who works online. That's a well-known form of employment. Is being an influencer a job? Can someone watching this who is pretty funky, they're quite cool, their friends like them, they've got a bit of a following on social media, is it a job? Can you make real money from this enough to actually keep you going? Last question to you briefly.
If you consider Elsa Majimbo, the Kenyan comedian, right? She started some videos at home, and now she's an international sensation. I think she lives in the US. She lives in South Africa a little bit as well, right? You think of Senegalese Kabiyame, the young, again, he was the first person to reach 100 million followers on TikTok, right? And that's all that he does now. So if you consider those two examples and many other local examples where people have used their authenticity, and people will be doing some makeup tutorials as an example, and then they become connected with brands. And lastly, there are a number of things that a lot of young people could do and leverage. Creative writing. There are many young people who write well, but they don't leverage social media to do that. Graphic designing, as an example. Coding. There are those people who just learn basic coding, but they're able to showcase their skill on social media and therefore are able to make money out of it.
And that's just a couple of easy ways of doing this as well. Really appreciate the advice and how to become an influencer that actually makes a difference. Communication strategist. Always good to have Lerato on the show. Lerato Chinkang joining us this morning. So if you're young, you're on social media, you're wondering if you can make some money off all the time that you spend on your phone or behind your computer, there you go. So creative writing, digital design, coding, whatever it might be, there are ways to do it. So instead of just sitting on your phone all day on social media, how do you make money from that? If you know, perhaps send me a few ideas. We'll maybe do a feature on the show about how to make a living from social media.